I feel like we kind of need to confront a little bit that cozy games allow for us to pursue other stories and other gaming where grief or harder emotions allows us to heal from the day to day.
Or even, well, I was thinking too that even with some of these games, if it's so far off that it's really hard to relate, it can almost give you an outside perspective into someone else's grieving process where it's
Yeah.
like not actually affecting you, but you can look at it as like a full outside like bystander, I suppose, and learn from it that way so that it's not, hurting you in the process. That probably doesn't happen quite as often, but I will say in Spirit Fair, it's happened a couple times where I'm not completely broken down by having to say goodbye to one of my favorite characters. Like maybe it's a character that kind of bothered me.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Gamers Gab, the podcast by gamers for gamers. I'm Artsy over at the Artsygamer. I make art, I play games, and I encourage others to do the same. And joining me today for today's Gamers Gab episode is none other than Colleen over at Clementine. So Colleen, before we get started, if you would, give us a brief introduction about your sweet self and your pronouns, please and thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Colleen, or Clementine, as Artsy so kindly mentioned. My pronouns are she, her, and I, well, as you probably can guess, do a lot of Animal Crossing content and a little bit of Stardew.
So within the last few years, the concept of cozy content creators and cozy games have boomed in popularity. Many gamers have come to love creative, come-as-you-are sorts of games that allow us to pursue open-ended storylines, but feel large and overwhelming emotions in a safe, controlled space. Now, the topic of today's episode revolves around grief in games and grief in community building, and it's become such a beautiful emotion to express in games, allowing for players the ability to constructively work on their healing process. And Colleen, you're one such content creator where you use your platform to apply that same level of kindness and compassion that often is seen in cozy spaces to grief.
I try, yes.
You try. And this year also marks the 10-year anniversary of your mom's passing. I am really sorry for your loss. Sorry.
Thank you.
But
10 long years.
10 long years. Wow. I've often heard that many cozy content creators feel the pressure to be positive and not have that space to process hard emotions such as grief. So how does grief play a role in your gaming or your content?
So as of right now, it doesn't play as much of a role as I really want it to, I don't think. But in previous videos, and if there is anyone here that has watched any of the chef challenge in particular, I have mentioned upon like receiving some of the letters from your in-game mom that it's a bit bittersweet to get those because the way that they're written is actually really close to how my mom would word things and kind of what she would talk about. Yeah, so it hits a little bit harder, and I have mentioned it in, I think, maybe 2 videos, so not nearly as many as I would want to. But it's so hard to escape grief or death, really, in any sort of cozy game. Because I just find cozy games are just such a good environment for that sort of healing and like processing because it's cozy to begin with, so it actually can kind of quiet your mind and give you that space to actually think.
Is Animal Crossing New Horizons the first game in the Animal Crossing franchise you've played?
Yes. So probably in the previous ones when I would be getting yelled at villagers, that probably wouldn't have gone the same. But in this one, yeah, it does give a little bit of space.
So, but I do know that letters from mom is a very consistent thing within Animal Crossing and within the franchise. And as someone who perhaps was not expecting that, when did you start playing Animal Crossing New Horizons? Was it at the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, just I think it was within the first month that it was released. And
Wow.
yeah, so still fairly fresh. And
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely say the beginning of the grieving process for me, which is honestly the first 6 years or so of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the best space for it to be I'm using that
Oh.
word a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the greatest space for me to be healing.
Mm-hmm.
So once Animal Crossing New Horizons comes out and then there's a whole pandemic happening and we're all just inside doing nothing, it does give you a lot of space to think.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily for me, my brain didn't take me to an incredibly dark place, which I know happened for some people, which is really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, because Animal Crossing New Horizons was more of a positive, I guess, influence is the word I'll
Mm-hmm.
use. It just gives you some more time and space to think about those sorts of things where you
Mm-hmm.
can I think it's the letter where she mentions seeing planes flying by and she waves at every single one because she's not sure which one you're on.
Mm-hmm.
That one is the one that always hits the hardest for me. So when I got that one the very first time, I do remember crying about it. But
Wow.
it was nice. It was a nice memory.
That's a very bittersweet because I know that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have conflicting emotions, specifically with mom writing letters to them in game, and it's positive and negative depending on the relationship you had. And I know that the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic had provided, as you said, the space for people to really start sitting with a lot of uncomfortable emotions.
We
And
had no choice. Yeah.
really, yeah. And so
Mm-hmm.
I really would love to hear, because you said that you noticed that a lot of people you knew, their brain kind of went somewhere a little bit more negative, but you used the pandemic and the lockdown to really sit with it. So how did you sit with it? Like, is there a specific process that you worked with it? Was Animal Crossing the tool that you used for it?
I would say, yeah, I would say that Animal Crossing was the tool in all of it because the amount of hours that went into it is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
um, but because yeah, I think for me, being overwhelmed and having to be out in the world all the
Mm-hmm.
time
Yeah.
was making it that much harder to focus on anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So when I literally could not be out in the world, and truthfully, like I'm a homebody. I do like being home.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't mad about that at all. So I mean, for me, it probably put me in a better headspace in the first place
Mm-hmm.
because I kind of wanted to be here anyways. But I think that there's probably a deeper reason to that of why I wanted to be home more.
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to, I guess, was helpful. So I don't know, quarantine kind of helped me, but so did Animal Crossing. And I think maybe it was I think it might have been a combination of both.
We also live in a society, specifically Western American or North American society, where grief or anything uncomfortable is not something that we actively give space to. It's I
Mm-hmm.
I found it really fascinating, the shift in the focus of compassion. And I didn't really get into gaming communities until the pandemic. I didn't start my YouTube journey or my Animal Crossing journey until late 2020. And so I found it really
Mm-hmm.
interesting that we had a community that was set on self-care, that was set on checking in on people, that was set on telling people it's okay to not be okay. And I don't think that, although the cozy gaming community had existed long before the pandemic, the niche and the
Mm-hmm.
genre just boomed in popularity and I think in need, which allowed for us to really confront not only grief but anger at how society prioritizes products over people, capitalism over people, money over people. And
Oh yeah, for
now
sure.
and now it's like we finally had that space to really just sit with ourselves and the whole of ourselves. And I would love to hear your thoughts on why you feel it's important that grief be an acceptable game mechanic in a wide range of genres, specifically in cozy games. Actually, no, a better question to ask before that is, do you play other games besides Animal Crossing New Horizons?
Well, yes, of course. But yeah, like, I mean, specifically related to grief, I have played about 73% of Spiritfarer, according to my Switch.
Man.
Depending on where you're at in your whole process, that can be a rough one. I will be honest. But at the same time, it is like, first of all, an incredibly gorgeous game. The music, top tier, S tier, just amazing. If anybody is thinking about playing this game, even though it came out a few years ago, absolutely do it, because Artsy is actually the one who made me want to play it.
What? No way.
Yeah, because you mentioned it, and I ended up looking into it, and I went, oh, I really like this art style. And then not fully knowing what I was getting into, I played it. And I would say, though, it's very cathartic as well, but definitely a journey through grief, through just helping people through those last stages and having to be kind of selfless about it. But then other than Spiritfarer, and we can always talk about that a little bit more if you want to, but other than Spiritfarer, I mean, there's Stardew Valley, which of course there's grief in that one. You start out with a grandpa that just passed away. So then you're already starting out with that, which is fine, because I mean, I don't get any letters from mom in that one. That's all from dad. So that's okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's other games, they just don't fully deal with like the grief aspect of it.
I had been thinking about, this conversation, and I'd been thinking about death and dying and grief and the wide ranges of grief, because for those who don't know, I started my gaming content creation journey during 2020 when, the year sucked in and of itself, but, my husband and I had been trying to conceive, and we ended up with 4 miscarriages within the span of a year. And so,
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. And so my grief is very different because it's a loss effectively without a body. And there's so much in play with miscarriages in general that it's really hard to have that featured in gaming. And so I think a lot of my consistent re-traumatization of losses made grief almost necessary for me to feel during any game that I played. And so with Animal Crossing, it wasn't necessarily the loss in games, because there is loss and grief in Animal Crossing in the game itself, but it was this notion of, I had a space where my trauma didn't touch it, and I could tune in for a couple of hours and right myself, and then get right back into therapy and get right back into focusing on what I needed to in order to just function during the day. And I was thinking about how we are really starting to see the impact of how a good story can really bring grief to the forefront and allow for that sense of catharsis, that sense of really experiencing something that we don't often have the permission to experience in real life. And I feel that we don't give that enough credit. Like, have you always been like a gamer person, or is it a relatively recent hobby for you?
I wanted to play a lot of video games when I was younger, and I did play some, but it's just not any that would really relate to the situation, I don't think, because it was a lot of like DDR and Guitar Hero, and I played like a Sonic game one time on the Wii, and then although I did play quite a few Mario games, but still, like, not a lot of like the grief that we're talking about. Mario Kart, again, I mean,
grief at losing, I suppose, but no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I know, I hear what you're saying. My introduction to like actual gaming, I think it was in 2000. I think it was before HubSpot and I were married, and he introduced me to a couple of games. One was Guild Wars 2, which has some grief in it, but it's not the main forefront of the this conversation. But oddly enough, the introduction to grief in games for me was Final Fantasy X. And HubSpot is laughing in the background right now, but I never cried so hard from like something that, because like, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but Final Fantasy, the series has so much, it has a lot of complex emotions. It's a little campy, but if you want to really truly cry, you know, big crocodile tears, like Final Fantasy X was the introduction that games truly can have an impact on somebody, when you're playing a character that is not you, having this impact that you know that there are characters that are quite frankly going to die and you have no control over that. And so
I know. Yeah.
And so the further introduction that I had with grief in games was BioWare's Mass Effect, which
interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you like shooter games. It's not like shooter.
I know
shooter.
What Mass Effect is.
Oh, you do.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. My goodness. I still think about certain NPCs and their death scenes. I still think about it. The fact that you have to pick and choose which characters you're going to lose. It's like the impacts of your choices and the fact that you were going to lose friends that you've had over multiple games. Holy crap, you know? And it's like it's this realization that, one, you are not in this bubble in your life where things happen to other people, things happen to you, and choices that you make. I mean, I hope that choices that we make don't lead to like the deaths of loved ones, but I still think that there's this wide range of gaming and storytelling that is truly complex and that allows us to fall in love and just want the best for these characters that are quite frankly zeros and ones and voice actors. And it still sits with you, you know?
Oh, it really, really does. And it's so funny you mentioned Mass Effect, because I saw it, either like a viral tweet or a meme maybe a week ago of someone saying that if they wanted to play Mass Effect, then I guess they were just going to be crying for the next however like much time. Because I think they re-released like all three of them so a bunch of people were playing it. They're like, oh no, so now I'm just going to cry like my life away again.
Well, honestly, like what I know that people use cozy games as a way to like distance themselves from the daily, like everything sucks. You know, I fully acknowledge that there is an important thing with cozy games where it's really just a fun time. But when you really think about the cozy games that have taken the community by storm, like Disney Dreamlight Valley, Stardew Valley has come back. There's an update that's coming with Stardew Valley. So excited. I'm
so excited.
I know.
Oh my gosh, I can't contain myself. And I'm so excited. I can't.
Yeah. So and also we have Animal Crossing, where we have characters who have lost their parents and had to, you know, figure out a way to manage. We have the concept of, I bring this up a lot with Animal Crossing, the concept of Furusato, the nostalgia of living in the village, the loss of the village, the loss of community where it was tight-knit, where the value of the person was not dependent upon the money that they made, you know. I feel like we kind of need to confront a little bit that cozy games allow for us to pursue other stories and other gaming where grief or harder emotions allows us to heal from the day-to-day.
Or even, well, I was thinking too that even with some of these games, if it's so far off that it's really hard to relate, it can almost give you an outside perspective into someone else's grieving process, where it's like not actually affecting you, but you can look at it as like a full outside like bystander, I suppose, and learn from it that way, so that it's not, you know, hurting you in the process. That probably doesn't happen quite as often, but I will say in Spirit Fair, it's happened a couple times where I'm not completely broken down by having to say goodbye to one of my favorite characters. Like maybe it's a character that kind of bothered me. And then if that's the case, then it's like, okay, I'm learning from this person and the people that they've been interacting with. I'm being very vague because I don't want to give away Spirit Fair in case anybody wants to play it, or in case, you know, I don't want to spoil it for you either.
Oh, well, for sure. I feel the same way. I was actually feeling kind of bad that I was so far removed. Like, I was able to say goodbye pretty easily to a couple of the characters, but I have but I have a feeling like it's more about the introduction that with grief or with really hard emotions that we really struggle with, like anger and, you know, feelings of betrayal, that I feel like Spirit Fair really brings up the fact that we are inherently very flawed people, and that grief has this tendency, and I don't know if you agree, grief has this tendency to kind of wash over the fact that we were flawed people. And when someone passes away, especially when you had conflicting feelings about them, it's like you want to give them a free pass because they're somehow mortal. What do you think about that?
Sometimes. I mean, it really depends in this day and age, because there really are some really awful people out there. But that being said, for myself personally, I would have to agree, because there might have been times, say when I was a teenager, that my mom had very, very sensitive smell. So wearing nail polish was kind of off the table. I couldn't do that for the longest time because it gave her migraines, I believe. So that sort of thing would have really bugged me back then. But, you know, those sorts of things, or like, I really, as I'm saying these things, they're just so surface level. I will say I had a very like blessed childhood and adolescence. Like I was very lucky with the parents. Like my dad is still alive, but very lucky for the mom that I had. So I don't have too many complaints, honestly. But like you're saying, just after all is said and done, like that's not the stuff that I remember that used to bother me so much when I was younger.
Yeah, it's funny because I also have this tendency, instead of really applying grief to games, I apply grief to art. And one of the comics that I did was that I applied the concept of grief with death as an ice cream flavor. And when my grandfather died a couple years ago, I couldn't really sit with the grief, like the type of grief that I was having. You know, was it angry? Was it, you know, was I at peace? Was I feeling conflicted about certain things? And I couldn't find that flavor of grief that I could apply and then have that moment of peace with that. And I think what I realized from incorporating something creative to the grieving process, that creating the comic itself with regards to grief with my grandfather allowed for me to recognize that I wasn't particularly close with him, but I have fond memories of being in his presence and spending time with him. And there were certain things about my childhood that, I don't know, like I wished that I could have pursued a better relationship, but the life that I ended up leading kind of had me removed from his final years, specifically because I was abroad and he was in assisted living. And so I think the better question, or not the better question, in furthering the concept of like how grief can be a mechanic in the games that we play, and it's very clear that we have quite a few. Is there other creative means that you've utilized grief or processing your grief? Because you make content on YouTube, but are there other ways that you really sit with that in a creative way?
Other than, there was one time, like probably a couple years ago, where I was writing a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't done that in quite a long time. But at that point in time, the writing was kind of a recollection of what had transpired just the night that my mom ended up passing away. And just to give a little bit of background so people don't think it was like super sudden or anything, she did fight ovarian cancer for 10 full years, and it was expected. So yeah, like the month of July is typically a little bit rough just because my body and my brain remembers being incredibly upset and exhausted. And even though at this point in my life, I am finally getting to a point where I feel happy most of the time. But even despite that, my body's like, no, remember when you were so sad 10 years ago? I'm like, yeah, I do remember that actually, but I would love to be happy right now, actually, if you could just chill just for a little bit. But I went off track and my train crashed. What were we talking about?
We were talking about creative measure, like other creative ways of processing grief. But I loved that you had mentioned that you have a muscle memory to grief every year.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. That's very true.
More and more people are bringing it up, I suppose, which I think, just like you're mentioning, people are feeling more open to talking about those sorts of things. But for a lot of more people, it's a lot more debilitating. Like for me, just being tired because like I was just exhausted. So I was sleeping a lot because I was crying a lot. And so that's like, I've been sleeping a lot this month, but there's other people that just have it, well, in my opinion, have it a lot worse, like the way that their body remembers these things. But yeah, I had been writing, and it was just basically going over what had happened, or I don't know if subconsciously I was trying to like put all of the details from that night into a little time capsule or something, so I wouldn't forget the last minutes or whatever. But I didn't end up finishing anything, so who knows.
Well, that's okay. I do feel that hard emotions are typically very sudden and very impactful. And sometimes it's just you need to start the thing. And if it's not finished, it's okay. I mean, that in of itself is pretty symbolic. I feel that way about games, is that I start really hard with a very impactful game like Spiritfarer or Cult of the Lamb, even though, I mean, there is a lot of grief in Cult of the Lamb, even though it's a little bit more like tongue-in-cheek and a little, a little bit.
But darker. I think that's what helps, though, with the grief part of it, if you can make it a little bit lighter, even if it's silly. Because I know that there's plenty of people who say, oh, you don't joke about death. Like, well, why not?
I think
my mom wouldn't be upset by it.
Yeah, right. I think I think death in of itself is one of those things that we put it on such a pedestal of being this somber and very like permanent thing. And I think it's because we as a species are very afraid of death and dying. We are very afraid of the permanence. We're afraid of, what comes after, or if there's anything that comes after. We're afraid of, what meaning do we have if this is all that there is? And I think what I love about grief and what I love about grieving in of itself is that we're clearly not gone. We have these instances of memory and the impacts that we've left on the world. And it doesn't have to be like Nobel Peace Prize levels of impact. But the fact that the pandemic, as traumatic and as awful as it was, we have created friendships that have lasted for years. We have created a literal community where we talk about these hard topics while playing quote unquote silly games.
Well, and I can't see a better way, truthfully.
No, I agree.
I think it's helped a lot of people.
How has it helped you at all?
Well, I just think having more people interested in the thing that I was so obsessed with at the time.
Yeah.
And then more and more, like you mentioned, just for the most part, like-minded people who are open to having those sorts of conversations. And then you might find a few people that, you talk to more, which is great. Like just finding more friends in the community. And then if you're able to discuss more things that way, because I know, well, and for me personally, anyways, sometimes the most personal things I feel more comfortable talking about with, well, I'll just to quote it for this like interview and for this purpose, like internet friends, which I consider them my full friends, but it's just something a little bit different. And I don't know what exactly it is, but it is a little bit more comforting and it's nice. I think that's probably the biggest benefit that I've seen.
Oh, absolutely. I know that I talked with May over at May Plays about online communities because she made the joke that all of her friends are on YouTube. And I'm like, there is such a thing as never met friends, as never met, or long distance friendships. And that in the same way of confronting grief, that confronting the fact that we prioritize in-person friendships or connections, like that's important, don't get me wrong. I know that there has been an impact, especially with the school system, that we are seeing that social interactions with young children or just children in general is really important for, maintaining, what it means to be a person. But in general, I think YouTube and Twitch and social media, although we do have an issue with how social media portrays the person, that we have been able to use social media platforms to say, I'm not okay, and I'm using this creative way and these games in order to process that, not just with, therapy or, not just with parasocial relationships, but with friends. And I think that's incredible that we live in that day and age.
Oh no, for sure. I think we're really lucky that with the timing of the pandemic too, I think we just got really lucky with Animal Crossing coming out. And maybe for some of us it became more of a like codependent sort of relationship for a little bit, which is completely fine.
Yep.
Me too. Yeah, it was really bad. The amount of hours I was playing per day, it was not okay. but that being said, it gives you a little bit of space to just make your own world for a little bit, not worry about anything else. And then eventually, when you finally relaxed enough, you can think about some other things that perhaps you weren't wanting to. But that being said, if you're thinking about it and you're going to cry, just cry, because crying is the best way to feel better about something. Like it's actually scientifically proven that letting the tears out relieves the stress. So just let her out. Let her out.
So I want to kind of go back to what you were saying about the codependent relationship with Animal Crossing, because I know that from a content creation perspective, a lot of people who have made their mark with Animal Crossing either feel that they can't walk away from it, or that there is something that's kind of holding us onto Animal Crossing as something that we need to maintain. And this is not related at all, but Peyton from Peyton's Corner had released a video about cozy games that she no longer played. And the notion that she still plays a little bit of Animal Crossing, but she doesn't really play it anymore. And she certainly doesn't really stream it very much anymore. And she said something that really stuck with me of like, I got all I wanted and all that I needed and all that I could out of the game. And now I want to move on to something else. And that really sat with me because I still play Animal Crossing every day. Like that is something that I do with my son in the mornings after his breakfast, is that I give him a controller that has no connection at all whatsoever. And we play Animal Crossing together for like 20 minutes. And we are getting to that point though, that he is wanting to move away from it or play it less time. And I've also was talking about that I haven't touched this save, the one that we're doing this interview on, for like a month and a half. And it was really startling to me that I was okay with that. And how the grief of the pandemic and the grief of my pregnancy losses being so in like tied to Animal Crossing that I feel like I'm getting to that point that I'm ready to move away from it, but I don't know what's next, and so I still hold on to that. Is that something that you are experiencing with Animal Crossing at all, or is that just something completely that you're experiencing something else?
I know that there's lots of content creators that feel the exact same way. And there's every once in a while, I'm not like excited to edit, for example.
Yeah.
But I've only been making videos for a little bit over a year. So I'm still, in my opinion, like kind of early in the content creation scope of things. So I'm not quite bored of Animal Crossing yet because I've only made like a certain set of content with it. Like I haven't done everything that I can do with it. But obviously if Nintendo was not going to be updating it and if we can't get away with a spicy Switch being on YouTube, then there's only so much that you can do. So then you do kind of have to eventually move into other things. And I can see why like some content creators might be scared to move on to something a little bit different, especially if they started out with Animal Crossing and they weren't doing anything else.
Yeah.
But I will also say though that a lot of these creators are so well loved, and just the comments that you see first are always just like, whenever I see so and so post a video, I always like first, like before watching. Yep. It's like, you really think that people aren't going to watch, like they're just happy that you're here. So I guess it's a little bit different depending on like size of audience and that sort of thing. But I think maybe for some people, it's just that was what got them to where they feel like they are right now. And I don't know exactly how I want to word it, but
it's
I think
okay. Well,
you know where I'm going with it.
It's okay. I understand where you're coming from. I think it's a grieving process in of itself because we're so comfortable with where we've been for the last couple of years. And although, COVID is still alive and well and happening and hitting people really hard right now, it's that at some point we need to figure out what life is post-COVID and what life is, quite frankly, post Animal Crossing New Horizons being the defining game of the cozy gaming community. And it's
true. Yeah.
It's been kind of scary to think that, all of these friends that we've made with Animal Crossing are pursuing other things. And I think a lot of people are worried, myself included. It's like, well, if we don't have this one game that defines our friendship, how do we define our friendship? And the answer is like the game never really defined our friendship. It was just the thing that we did together. But it's just always
the thing we met doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's going to be really uncomfortable, but grief's uncomfortable. And
always
growth is uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, it's true. I don't know. For some reason, because I used to hate change so much,
Same.
But moving forward and playing different games is kind of exciting to me now because I have more of a reason to, which it sounds bad that I didn't always just play them for myself before, but I've always been a very creative person, and being able to actually make something, put it on YouTube and have people actually watch it, I think is a bit more rewarding than just me doing something for myself all the time. Because I do play games on my own, don't get me wrong. Like I play some Pokemon Unite, which is stressful, but but there's some other ones. Like I have other saves of Stardew that I don't play for YouTube content. So I do keep things for myself. But now that I have this channel and like more people to potentially enjoy the games with me, kind of more enticing. Like especially going through, or when I was doing a little bit of research for this and I was looking up some more grief related games is what I was trying to say. I combined the two words. But I was looking up more that just specifically deal with grief. And now I have, I think, 3 or 4 more games that I want to play.
Oh, well, that's a really great segue because in addition to like grief in itself and loss as part of the gameplay, it seems that you have games that you're really excited to bring forward to your channel to share with other people that also, even if it doesn't have like hard emotions as the forefront, that clearly it's a deep and personal response. So what games are you excited to bring to your channel or that you've been playing recently that you would recommend to others?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm not quite sure in what capacity I could bring it to the channel, but Spiritfarer is just so good. And I don't know if I would want to start a new save because you kind of already have it all spoiled. But that one is so good. Like maybe I could make a video about it. But then in my research, and this came out, I believe it was 2021, and I somehow missed it completely, but it's called Before Your Eyes. Have you heard of this game?
No, I have not.
So it's on Steam, and I'm reading through the description of it. And basically, the main character, and this is in the description, so it's not a spoiler, but the main character passes at the beginning of the game. And to move on, you go through your life's memories. But the description of the game says that the best way to play is to have your webcam hooked up. So then I'm reading and I go, oh, you're actually blinking through your memories.
Wow.
Like, yeah, and that just sounds incredible. Like, how do they come up with these things? So that one sounds super cool. And again, it's called Before Your Eyes. And then a recent one that came out is, oh no, I don't know how to pronounce it. Aka. It's AKA. It has that cute little raccoon looking thing.
The red panda, yeah.
Yes. And it says, basically it's just more of a serene take to the healing process. So there's nothing really that can stress you out in it. Like you're not trying to make sure that you don't go hungry. There's no stamina bar. There's nothing like that. Like if you just want to sit and watch the water, you can just sit and watch the water. So that sounds really nice and cute. And also the art style is, it looks really cute too. So I really like that.
There's a couple of games that I've personally been wanting to pursue and consider for not just like the channel, but for playing. And the one that I've really loved that I probably will say is one of the best games that I've played this year is Coffee Talk. It's a visual novel that's set in a supernatural Seattle that has a bunch of different species of people like incubus, elves, orcs, all of that. And it's all about...
I saw the trailer for that.
It is so good. I have to say it is probably my favorite game this year. I do feel that visual novels in general do not get the hype that they truly deserve, because especially when you have like the choices that you make or the way that you interact with characters, it does have an impact of the overall storyline. But I do feel that, one, it confronts grief, but it also confronts a lot of hard issues that you really feel for these characters and that you want them to succeed. And there's also Coffee Talk 2 that I have not played yet, but it's truly an incredible game. And I think that our cozy gaming community has been founded, and that Animal Crossing really set the bar, is that we are pursuing games that really leave an emotional mark, that lead to I don't know if catharsis is the right word, but that contentment of, I had this big swell of emotion and it happened, and now I'm left with this feeling of being complete. And it's been truly incredible. Are there any other games that you have been considering bringing to your channel or that you would like to also play?
Well, just in general, which not related to grief, the Puff Pals Island Skies.
That's awesome. Yeah.
well, because I signed up for the alpha or for the beta, whatever,
Oh, that's
whichever one is
cool.
coming out first.
Mm-hmm.
So that one will be coming, and I'm so excited because it's supposed to be this summer. So
Ooh.
I'm just waiting patiently. And what was this other one I had on my list here? Yes, I have a list. Oh, it's called What Comes After. And the artwork on it looks incredible. I'm always really drawn to the artwork in games.
Mm-hmm. Same.
That's why I love Spirit Fair so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote a little synopsis because, again, I haven't played this, but it just looked really cool and sounded really cool. So I guess you're traveling on a train and you can move through the different cars of the train, meeting the other life forms who are also on that journey to the next part
Ooh.
of like afterlife. Yeah, sounds really cool, right?
Yeah, that sounds Spiritfarer-esque to me a little bit.
Yeah, a
That's
little
so
bit,
cool.
yeah. And then
Wow.
there's one called, and again, I might mispronounce it. I'm going to say rhyme, but it's spelled Rime.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's a shipwreck a kid and his dad are in a shipwreck and the kid has to climb this tower, but it's like the different levels are representing the different stages of grief.
Ooh.
So that's also very
Ooh.
interesting. Yeah.
Have you played Gris? It's a
I
puzzle.
read about that today.
Oh my goodness. That is one of the, in addition to Animal Crossing, I think that was like the second game that I got on my Switch in 2020. Although I didn't have a as deep of an emotional response as some other people had, it is a beautiful game. It's a
It looks beautiful
in the butt to like put it up onto, like, if you're playing the Switch and you dock it for your computer or television, that there's a bit of a delay, or at least there was for me, with like jumps and things, and so I got really frustrated. But the different chapters and stories were
so cool.
incredible. And I think that if with Rhyme or Ream or however that's pronounced, I think that Gree should absolutely be on anybody's wish list who wants to do like a puzzle platformer game. And that's something else that I found has become a really popular, at least within the last couple of years, is puzzle games that have a cute meaning or a cute story to it. So like A Little to the Left, which I haven't played, but I now have in my inventory, and Unpacking, which I did not think that unpacking as a premise, it's just like, you're unpacking a person's life. But then it hit me, oh wow, you're unpacking a person's life as they grow up.
Yeah. And moving them as they move on. And
I know.
With people.
Yeah.
And I've seen about 3 full playthroughs of that game because I'm addicted to YouTube. But so I haven't played it, but I've seen it 3 times, and it's moving. Like halfway through the game, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you, almost. Like you feel proud of them. And I wasn't even the one playing.
Well, what's really funny is like the character and I like have some really interesting similarities. Like they're an artist. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to like spoil it, but like they're really into art and they like to do rock climbing and yoga and stuff. And I was like, am I unpacking? Like right? Like, am I unpacking my life? This is weird. But it's also really cool how these very like not typical games that have very, quote unquote simple mechanics can really allow for you to feel not only something for the character that isn't you, but allows for a very deep personal feeling that is very common, like,
for sure,
like the concept of unpacking, or the concept of really sitting with the nostalgia of like what you take with you, and how like less and less of the previous house is brought with you, or why we hold on to certain stuffed toys, or why we hold on to certain art pieces. It's really phenomenal how these games really remind us that even though it's not you, there's a part of you that you definitely feel this, and it hits the heart really hard.
I think, well, and specifically with unpacking, because you're just unpacking, there's not like really intensive gameplay. it gives you that much more time to think and make up a narrative in your head if you're one of those types of people that does that, which I am.
Me too.
So then, so you start unpacking and you go, oh, I bet that they had this in high school and they did this with it. And then, and then you make up this whole backstory and then you move on to the next home. And then all of a sudden something's different, or the thing that you made up a silly little story about is gone. And then all of a sudden you're kind of sad over a fake story that you made up that's not even in the game.
Yep, that's not even true. And then it just impacts you for days. Yep.
But you have so much time. Yeah. No, you have so much time to think when you're playing those games that you're just kind of making up the story on your own, just with everything that they're presenting to you.
We kind of already answered the last question that we have for this interview of like what sort of impact can games have on processing hard and often overwhelming emotions. And I think what we were settling on, and you can please tell me if you agree or disagree, if you want to add on to it, is that the impact is that it really reminds us that we're human and that other people are human, and that the importance of compassion and allowing for people to have that space to grow and process, it helps us become better people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, as long as, well, the people playing the cozy games anyways have the same intentions. So, I mean, that's always a factor in it. But I definitely agree. I think with Animal Crossing, especially just because it is cozy coded, you might get some people who maybe don't always play these sorts of games, and then once they do start playing them and they can relax a little bit, and like let's just hypothetically say that they're not playing a first person shooter 24/7 anymore, like it might help with, at the very least, calming you down a little bit. But then I do know for some people Animal Crossing is kind of infuriating sometimes because it's not fast paced enough.
Yeah.
So I think it so depends on the person and what they're wanting at that point in time. Because if you don't want the quiet and to be able to think about the things, then that's probably not what you're going to give yourself anyways. So I think a lot of us, this is what we wanted or subconsciously wanted at the very least. So when Animal Crossing came out, we were told to stay inside. We all went, yes, no problem. Let me grab my Switch and play Animal Crossing and just not think about the sad things.
Yeah.
And then it was long enough that, I mean, some of us, apparently, me included, came out on the other side a little bit better for it.
I agree. I feel that I wish that a pandemic never happened. I really do. I wish
I wish it didn't either.
But I do feel that we had this really great opportunity to, wherever we are now, that I sincerely hope that we came out of it with friendships we never considered, with a form of creativity that we never thought we'd be able to do. And it seems that we are starting to introduce the concept of grieving and hard emotions as a part of a conversation that we were once told was socially taboo. I think that we are getting to that point, hopefully, especially in Western society. I don't know if it's different in Europe or if it's different in the Southern Hemisphere, or if it's different. It's just, at least in where I was brought up, that grief or hard emotions or hard feelings or confronting things we're not okay with was never really okay because it made people uncomfortable. And I'm kind of at that point, having a set of grief that is very unique to me, but not unique to me, that it's like, I really want to push discomfort, not to the detriment of others, but really encouraging people. It's like, hey, if you're having a hard time and you have the ability to pursue therapy, go get therapy. If you need to find a creative thing that allows for you to be mad and be constructive about it, I want you to be pissed, like be angry,
Just
and cry.
Do it in a way that's not going to hurt other people.
Yep.
Yeah, that's like
Absolutely.
that's the hard thing for some people to grasp. But then once they do, great things happen.
And I think gaming is a really great tool for that. I think that
Mm-hmm.
as we are drawing this conversation to a close, that we have these sets of games that allow for us to process emotions healthily and allow us to share that with other people, which I think is a factor that we don't often get to, is that we should be allowed to communally wow, I can't word that, communally grieve and be upset and celebrate and mourn. And I think that's what really brings and ties communities together for the long haul.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially our generation, just collectively growing
I
up
agree.
in the world that we have with, say, even jobs or schools giving you what, 3 days of bereavement, 7 days of bereavement, as if that's enough. Like, I'm going on 10 years and I cried about my mom last week. Like, it doesn't just magically, oh, you're fine after a week. No, the feelings become even more complex, if I'm being honest. So just be easy on yourself is one message that I would like to give. It's just not everyone else is doing just fine. Behind closed doors, they probably aren't. Just be easy on yourself because someone has to be, and it should be you.
Absolutely. 100%.
Be your own best friend.
Be your own best friend. I like that. I need to be better about that myself. It's
cringy, but oh my gosh, it's true.
It's true.
You need to be a better friend to you.
Yeah, no, it's I know that we often say that, find the partner, find the family that will truly, see what, like, have your best interests at heart. But if you don't have your best interests at heart, how can you expect other people to do that? And
exactly.
And again, I think that's something that I found really funny with games like Stardew Valley, of all things. It's like, this is why I cannot romance Shane. I cannot romance Shane because it's not that people who are going through addiction or depression don't deserve love. That's not what I'm saying. But in his journey with where he is spiraling out of control, he does not need to be worrying about me. He does not need to be worrying about a person who is just like waltzes in being like, oh, hey, you have a blue chicken. Can I have your blue chicken?
That's the least of his worries right now. Come on, guys.
No, I know. And so I do think that games like that have really taught me boundaries of, like, the importance of, do I need to, as you said, be my best friend and really stick up for myself. And I think that games, I don't know how it happened, but games and other forms of creativity have truly been the platform and the canvas that we needed in the last couple of years to really say, like, it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to
take care of yourself.
And to establish boundaries and to end relationships that do not support that. And what a wild ride, right?
Oh, no, it's true. I think the saying is, like, you can't fill anyone else's cup if yours isn't full.
Or you can't or always put on your mask before you help others in the event of an airplane catastrophe, which, by that point you should probably not be worrying about that at that point. But anyway. But anyway, Colleen, thank you so much for coming on Gamers Gab to have, quite frankly, a very necessary conversation, not only in the cozy gaming community, but just in gaming in general and just in life. And is there any way that we can aggressively promote you in the Gamers Gab way? How can I share your amazingness to the world?
Oh, I mean, just through YouTube at this point, honestly. It's just the videos. That's all I've got for you, Artsy.
That's not true. You're hilarious on Twitter. I don't know what you're talking about.
I do have Twitter. I mean, Twitter is such a mess right now. I've been, like, quietly not using it as much, so I don't really want to plug the Twitter. Like, maybe come to Instagram if that ends up being more popular. But I do have that. Well, and even Threads, I'm so hit or miss with social media. It's tough for me sometimes. It's just my brain gets so overwhelmed.
So YouTube, basically.
Just everything.
So YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube. Okay. But I do have my links on YouTube to Twitter and to Instagram. And Twitter, I have loved forever. So, I mean, I probably will be there until it's fully destroyed. But yeah, you can join me there. I talk a little bit more sarcastically on Twitter, I find.
She's hilarious, friends. You need to go follow her wherever she is. She's great. No, you're so funny. Don't you trash talk. Don't you go there. No. We just had an hour-long conversation of like being your own best friend. You're hilarious. Do not.
I'm funny sometimes. I agree. Oh no, trust me. When I'm editing Artsy, I laugh at my jokes all the time. And then I'll also rewatch my videos sometimes because I'll really like the way I edited something. I'm like, I want to see that again. So I am my best friend. I promise.
That's great. And that's something I think we should also like improve to people, like, or like watch your own stuff. I know that a lot of people are like, oh my God, I can't watch my own stuff, but like watch your own stuff. That's a learning moment. And also like sometimes I'm funny. Like I wish I could be funnier in my videos with like my live streams truly. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, friends.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yes, that's a whole other conversation. But friends, you know the drill. Go follow Colleen over at CoClementine. I believe you are starting your dipping your toes into partnership with YouTube, which is amazing. Congratulations.
The very beginnings. Thank you. Yeah, it's like the benefits for streamers, which I don't really do.
It's okay. You'll get there.
We're getting close. Everything's good.
Colleen is hitting, or very close to hitting, the big 1K. So if you are not subscribed to this amazing person who has quite a delightful series with cooking and Animal Crossing and also some Stardew Valley stuff, go check her out. She's great. Absolutely has the artsy seal of approval, which you don't need my approval, but just wanted to be lame about it. Anyway.
I appreciate it very much.
Anyway, but friends, thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye.